Hello, everybody. I'm sticking to the format of last week, although I was supposed to do this about 20 minutes ago, so it is actually 5 o'clock now. I'll record it as close to live as possible. I still haven't heard back from Substack about whether or not whenever I'll be allowed to do live video. I don't think it really matters. Reading comments, people seem more than happy to catch up with it, and it got lots of views. So I get loads of stats now. It's great. I was already addicted to stats from Twitter, and now I can be addicted to stats from Substack. It's it's my nerdy little dream. But as you know, as I speak now, it's obvious, by the way, that the Polish government has not read my Substack. Bad news, Polish government, because you're making a mistake. They're threatening to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he goes to the 80th anniversary of Auschwitz. Optics. I mean, that's just horrendous. The Prime Minister of Israel can't be at the 80th anniversary of Auschwitz because you're threatening to arrest him under a dodgy warrant. Oh, so at least you're all informed. There's going to be another Substack article tonight. Articles are always going to be behind a paywall because I do need to encourage people to move into being paid subscribers. I'm very grateful to all types of subscribers, but I do really need people to move into paid. I'm going to put more behind a firewall eventually, paywall, but I'll wait a while and I'll never put everything behind a paywall. So there will always be and I would quite like everybody. I think people know that I mentor young people for a variety of charities, and I'm going to say things on law that are going to be useful, that might inspire them to be lawyers. And I don't want everything to be behind a firewall, paywall, because as a kid I couldn't have afforded it. So I do get it. Right, but then without further ado, into the questions. Donna says, is there any way we can legitimately discover the full extent to which Starmer has nobbled the judiciary, CPS, and police? It's clear to me they have Starmer's dabs all over them. And I think it's important that it's brought front and centre. I can't think of a way. I agree that things look dodgy. And I agree that people ought to know. What I'd say is that constitutionally, I don't think that's necessarily illegal. If anybody's going to start listening to the Constitution podcast, at some point I'm going to lose my temper about the separation of powers because we don't have it, and we never did. So I'm not entirely sure I mind that a government can put pressure on a judiciary to do something, or in a certain circumstances. There are lots of legitimate times you might need to do that, and I tend towards having fewer laws and more allow a government to do that and then make it public, so that the control mechanism in that case is not lawyers and judges and whether anybody makes a legal fuss. The control mechanism returns to what I think it should be constitutionally, which is your opinion. And if you think the government has done it in a dodgy way, then you would know and you can change how you vote. And that's why I'm going to talk more about returning to the political constitution, returning to the idea that politics regulates things, not lawyers, not courts. We're not in charge of everything. You all are. Particularly everybody on my Substack, because everybody on my Substack is lovely. We are so polite. It's so much better than Twitter. I can see the day. There'll be a day when I've got enough followers. I just don't go there anymore. It's just so mean. But that's my answer to you, Donna. John, hello, Stephen. Oh, see, look, and he puts thank you for your consideration at the end. We are lovely. Anyway, my sequence for dealing with the legal immigrant issue would be, right, to declare a state of emergency. Yes, why haven't we declared a state of emergency? If this is not a state of emergency, what is a state of emergency? Now, the previous government did actually ask me, can we declare this a state of emergency? And I went through the case law and I told them yes. So I think, sure, that's John, with you 100%, state of emergency. Set up a no-nonsense Cobra committee of grown-ups. I hate committees, John. Leave the ECHR immediately. I think that's sensible. Leave any other legal treaty tying our hands immediately. We don't need to leave treaties. We can just unpick them from our laws, and I'll do a Substack on that. I'll do a post on this explaining. But yeah, similar idea. Implement common sense approach. Return all illegal immigrants. Return any new arrivals on the day they arrive. Very sensible. Very sensible. There are all sorts of practical ways it can be done, but the most important thing is it can definitely be done, and it's not being done. And Starmer went on yesterday to say, "Oh, there's nothing about how brilliant I've been that I would change." So he obviously just doesn't want it to stop. I mean, at a certain point, we have to call people out as liars. It's terribly difficult because they might sue us in defamation, but I just don't believe he wants to stop the boats. But that's just my personal opinion, because personal opinions are a defense in defamation. Next, he's not going to see me. Next, Hillary. Hello, Stephen. See, again, my questions are, why can the Speaker manipulate the parliamentary rule of law, or whatever it is referred to as, on parliamentary privilege, and stop MPs asking questions in their comments? Because that is our constitutional setup. We had a big bust up. We had a war, civil war, and Parliament said, we're in charge, you're not in charge, to the King. Courts are part of royal power, so they can't change Parliament. I mean, I know they tried to with Brenda and the spider brooch, but don't worry about that. I'll cover that in detail again later. But ultimately, the House regulates itself. As Speaker, he's in charge of the House. That's why it really matters who the Speaker is. And again, that's something that can return to political control. If you think the Speaker's outrageous, tell your MP. If you think the Speaker's, absolutely a disgrace, get the message out there. Get people to agree with you, and that will regulate it. I'm middle-aged now, but the last Speaker I genuinely respected was Betty Boothroyd. And I think that's a tragedy for the House, but that's the House. If the House wants to be, it's like when it had the Boris trial, which was an utter disgrace, and it wasn't just me saying that. Lord Panic, no fan of Conservatives or Boris, pointing out that this is a disgraceful show trial, and they did it anyway. And there was no law that could stop them, no court could stop them. But I just sat, an MP came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm not sure about your tweeting about all of this. It's getting terrible." And I just said, I'm not accepting this. I don't want to live in a country where you behave this way. You are all behaving badly. Trust me. And he actually did, and he's still a mate. No, the Speaker is, you form your own opinions of the Speaker, because this Substack is not for telling people what to think, how they think, and what they think. But if you think the Speaker is outrageous and a disgrace, then I think we probably agree. Why can a plea of not guilty be entered even when there's no question about the person being responsible? Because we operate a principle of justice on the idea that it is better for 99 guilty people to go free than for one innocent person to be punished. It's extreme. I think globally we invented that principle. It comes directly out of the fact that we spent a long time being really oppressed. The Lord of the Manor had an oubliette in his castle, and he could throw you in it because he thought you looked funny. And that sort of treatment, after enough time, you go, enough is enough. We're not putting up with this. Only people who are genuinely, convicted can be convicted. And that's the start of Magna Carta. That's where we all start, and pushing back. And it's to protect us all from the state. It's not to protect bad people. And children and young people are being made to use pronouns for individuals that identify as a gender group. I don't think that's lawful. They do not end up with a school sanction for misgendering the individual. Is this a form of compelled speech? Yes. I think it's unlawful in that we have rules that say that you can't bring politics into school, and that's clearly political. So that's where I'd fight it. I'd use the Education Act and the provisions in that. To fight that, if I were a concerned parent and it were happening, I would Google them and send them to the head teacher. I would make a stink. I would write to the chair of governors. I would become a governor, because it's always relatively easy at any school. They're always looking for governors. And I would kick off, because this is just clearly nonsense. And I protect my child from all of this. I'm bisexual, but I'm not buying into all this nonsense. I'm just not having it. I quite like truth, and you can't really get away from truth, and we have to be truthful. There are two sexes. I agree with J.K. Rowling. I think she's marvelous. But if it's happening in your school, fight back. Janice, I would like to understand why the government, which was elected based on lies and deceit, it's an increasing issue. So I've read it all. Janice written quite a lot, but I mean, I agree with it all. I might have to start saying certain things. It's really, do people understand there's a real tension for me, because there is a sort of accepted position in once you are, a respectable member of society. I'm not saying that you're, but I come under pressure. So there's this concept of things we can't possibly say. We can't possibly say that. And I always talk about the T word in that. That's treason. I couldn't possibly accuse anybody of treason. That would be impossible. And there's probably good and proper reasons for this, so that I don't abuse my position and my authority to run around causing chaos just to become famous, which I will never do. I'm sure I could be an awful lot more famous on Twitter and various other places if I did outrageous things. It's an obvious route to fame. It always has been with humans. But I try and stay sensible. So there are certain things I can't say, but I do feel increasingly pushed towards doing something about this government's blatant, let's call it, abandonment of truth at this stage. I'm thinking about writing to the Electoral Commission. I would have to publicise that I was doing all that, because otherwise they'll just completely ignore me, because they don't want to get involved. But people don't want to get involved. I mean, there's a lot of that going on. People don't want to cause a fuss. But this is why, actually, Substack, I have the deepest sympathy right now for proper Labour people. I've got mates who they're proper Labour, they're lifelong Labour. They're heartbroken. It's just awful what's going on. Nobody I've ever known in my entire life who votes Labour would take away the winter fuel allowance from poor pensioners. None. So I'm not sat here judging actual Labour voters or Labour people. This government is absolutely unbelievable. I think we might get to talking about other words. I just have to go slowly, because they pile on me anyway. I've been doing this for years, and I've always stayed utterly respectable. I get piled on over nonsense. I get regulatory complaints over stuff that isn't in any way controversial. I got utterly, utterly attacked, and it isn't it's an assault, harassment. But I was utterly piled on over trying to defend the rule of law. Right. What a terribly controversial position that must be. Oh, Stephen must be so controversial for trying to defend the rule of law. Utter lunacy. Right, Ray. How can we establish UK court at the top of the hierarchy rather than EU courts? Why do our politicians choose to follow their precedents rather than following our own, especially as France, etc., is choosing to ignore them without issue? I think raises three interesting points, Ray. So let's take them in an order. France and the others ignoring the ECHR is not something I would want to see us copy. So I would much rather, I think our choice on the ECHR is stay in it, in which case it is going to block our control of the immigration system, or leave. I really don't see stay in it and ignore it as a third choice. And I'll tell you for why. We are a rule of law country, and I defend the rule of law. As I said, I got attacked for it once. I like the rule of law. The rule of law keeps us safe from tyrants. And therefore, we ought to, if we're in a court, we ought to follow what it says. Now, this is going to come around to bite me in the proverbial, because we are technically in the International Criminal Court, but I just don't think we should be. I think it's a joke. But again, on the ECHR, I really don't advocate staying in something and then not following it, because I think that sends the wrong message. Are we going to ignore our own courts then? What are we going to do? Are we ignore the Supreme Court? Going to listen to the High Court? Who are we going to? I don't like this. Don't like this. Don't like this. This is not good. This is not good. No. So that's that principle. I personally, you may disagree, but I would personally like to see that. Why do our politicians choose to follow them? Because it became really fashionable in the 90s and nobody's moved on. It became crushingly fashionable, so fashionable that even I bought into it. But I'm afraid we at some point we have to wake up and face reality. Um, I think people need to understand how naff this country was in the 70s and how, as a result, and the 60s and all the rest, and after the war, because we had rationing still, and we never got, given money by the Americans, we got sent a bill that we had to pay, and we didn't pay off until the 90s. So we were always sort of slightly naff, the meat content of sausages, just everything. And so it became really fashionable to hate on England and really cool to believe that the continent is amazing. And, everything that comes from continental Europe must be special, fantastic and brilliant. You go back and watch somebody like Fanny Craddock just absolutely enraptured over something foreign. Or even if it's only just rumored to be foreign, it'll still be cool. And a little bit of that is still with us, and they think that these international courts are somehow cool. They think that foreign judges are somehow better than domestic. It's all just total nonsense. So I'm afraid it is just fashion. Fashions, thank goodness, change, and I think this fashion is changing quickly. How can we establish UK courts? Well, we just leave these institutions. We don't need them. What do we want them for? We've got the best courts in the world, and I can say that, and I don't believe anybody can seriously debate that with me. Come on, which jurisdiction then? Come on, who? And if you know international jurisdictions, as I do, it's very, very hard to argue that there is a better court anywhere. I would argue I would take it to individual judges. So there was a judge in Australia called Gummo. And I would argue that Gummo is so good that he's better than many of our judges on something called equity law. But that's very specific, and Australia's not packed full to the rafters with gummos. It just isn't. So the idea that our courts are naff in some way is really the idea that needs to die. We actually have the best ones. Marie, if no UK Parliament can tie the hands of the next, is it true that Blair found a loophole using international law? If so, how does a UK government overcome treacherous international deals? Okay, I've half written this article, so we need to wait for the article, Marie. But basically, because I found a way. He was clearly, I do think he was trying to use international law to do something we call entrenchment, but our constitution is allergic to entrenchment, doesn't like entrenchment. And again, I'll point out why the constitution, because the constitution's evolved, so it's not a theoretical position. It hasn't become anti-entrenchment because I don't like entrenchment, or because Bob didn't, 200 years ago, didn't like entrenchment. The constitution has evolved to be anti-entrenchment because entrenchment causes rebellion. If you get political policies and they're effectively entrenched in your system and you can't get rid of them, Sod's law is that eventually your society will bump into a problem that is made worse by that policy, because no policy is perfect, ever. All policies are devised by humans, so they're all flawed, and they all suit or don't suit their particular times. A bit like the global current immigration rules. They clearly don't suit these times. But if you can't change them, then what's going to happen? Are the people just going to suck it up? Or are they going to rebel? So that's what happens. So that's why we're anti-entrenchment. I think we can get out of all of this, and I'm more than happy to help anybody. I've been told to my face that the Labour government will not ask for my help. That's their choice. I am very hopeful that future governments will. Vicky, £22 billion black hole. Have they not spent that 10 times over? Yes, they have. Can we stop 2K free spelling free? Oh, I can't deal with all these. He's just letting another man buy your wife clothes. Smash your own foundations, build up the ground. Yeah, he is quite shocking, but you're going to have to fix him with politics. Okay, he has to fall by politics. You have to complain to your MPs. You have to let them know you're not voting Labour. They have to realise the people who will deal with this are Labour MPs. Okay, and they're not currently. They're sitting there with their fingers in their ears, humming out loud, and you just have to keep screaming at them until they notice. They will notice. It does. Democracy does work. We do have this system because it's the worst form except all the others. It does work. Lizzie asked a cheeky question. Right? Do you want to know why Lizzie's question was cheeky? Because Lizzie asked it on Twitter. I'm not doing that again. I'm not taking a question from Twitter again. It's Substack. We're the nice people. We're the lovely people. You're the people who, thank goodness, keep me going economically. I'm all biased for Substack in future, but just this once, I'll answer Lizzie's question, which is: does the real Donald Trump have to accept Peter Mandelson? No. No, I don't believe he does. And there are formal ways and informal ways he can reject him. I think he has a legal power to reject him, but you often don't need to if you're the country. If a country that is a friend of yours gets in touch with you and says, mate, can you get rid of your ambassador, please? This is painful. Then you will, because that's international diplomacy. And Lord Mandelson was praised this morning by the last US ambassador we had to get rid of because he was an idiot. And it leaked that Lord Darroch had said all sorts of awful things about Mr. Trump. So away from the embassy, Lord Darroch then had to go. The fact that, we keep these people and that they get invited on the BBC to then chat about Peter Mandelson, I mean, that's more of an issue. But no, Lizzie, Peter Mandelson does not have to be accepted. And yes, I've seen the photos too. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. I will have to stop this now. And I'm sure I've done this before. Anyway, talk to you all soon. Probably not next week. It's Christmas. Yeah. I'll work out one day.